This Thrive Loud episode is brought to you by Hinge Consulting and Turnkey Podcast. Learn about these companies that are thriving each and every day at hingeconsulting.co and turnkeypodcast.com.
Now I'm getting really excited. Okay, this is the part where I'm going to get loud.
Holy crap, here we go.
I like telling stories.
I learn best through experiences.
Everything I do is because of everything I did.
Talk about having maximum impact while having a ton of fun.
When you can net through that, what you do leave behind for your listener will have more impact.
Wow, bring it on.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
You know, normally I save my vocal cords for a mindless podcast show that for over 600 episodes has two boneheads yapping back and forth to one another about total fuckery. But when I heard Strickland Bonner was going to be a guest on Thrive Loud, now that's worth getting excited about. Here's Strickland Bonner on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another spectacular episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, by popular request, people have been asking me, man, who's that cool-sounding guy at the top of the show, and what's that all about, and who is he? And more notably, he's a man that everyone's been asking to do some interviews on his own podcast show. So it was about time that I said, you know what? It's time we brought the real brains behind the Nice Guys on Business podcast up and center. This is half of that equation. A killer guitarist who for 25 years played in an amazing band, father of triplets, a genuinely happy guy, always in the best of moods. The podcast universe's power editor audio machine. His name is Strickland Bonner. Hello, Strickland.
Lou Diamond, how are you today?
So this gets to be fun. As I started to do in this opening here, this was important. Everyone is getting tired of just hearing Doug everywhere. So you guys, for the Thrive Loud listeners who are not fans of the Nice Guys on Business podcast, it's very important to know that Strickland and Doug have probably one of the most popular business podcast shows out there, 5 days a week. And Strickland will ask why that's the case. And there's a combination of their banter 2 days a week and 3 days of amazing interviews. And they've also been able to create an incredible business. And that's, I think, what we want to talk about today is really the business that they've created, not so much from just how you can use podcasting to promote yourself, but what actually is going on in podcasting. And nobody is sitting in a better seat than Strickland. So Strickland, I'm so glad to have you on Thrive Loud today to talk about this.
Lou, I am quite honored to be on the show because I know you have had some heavy hitters, some big names on this show, and I've enjoyed pretty much every episode and every interview you have done. So I appreciate it. I feel like I'm in very good company now. Thank you.
We're in good company. Strickland and I, as two voiceover experts, there's no Steve O'Brien here. But what I did want to ask, and this is kind of fun, what I figured what we would do for those that aren't as familiar with the little behind the scenes of a podcast, I figured we'd kind of start from the beginning of the show and kind of work through from how we actually put the stuff together, because people are always fascinated by this and all the work that's entailed. And I think we can share from a lot of your experiences the different types of ways of doing it, because there's so many different formats of shows out there. And I know listeners love this stuff. So maybe let's do that. Let's start off from getting a show started and all the behind the scenes that it takes to put a podcast together. Not just the actual production, but the business of it too, right? So
absolutely. That sounds great.
So kick us off. How do you, I want to start a podcast. I was your first client. And I definitely was the how not to do it thereafter, but you got more organized ways to do it today. So talk to us about how you go about that whole process and what it's like from behind the scenes.
So Lou Diamond definitely was our first guinea pig. He was the very first client for Turnkey Podcast, which is our company with myself and Doug Sandler. And basically, we are teaching people how to create a podcast from nothing. And so you got to start by having an idea. You got to figure out, okay, what is my message? What am I going to be talking about? And then from there, it's about, okay, do I want to do interviews or do I just want to do a monologue where I'm just talking or I'm talking to a partner or who knows what it might be? People get really intimidated by the gear. The gear is not that big a deal. And then you get into like physically how to do it and how to record it and how to put it up and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's a process and there's lots of different ways you can do it. But after you get doing it for a while, it's not that complicated. It just seems really intimidating at first because there's so many little things that have to go together.
So let's talk about the different formats of shows, because that's actually really cool. Obviously, we are an interview show, and here's a perfect example of it. What have you liked about the interview shows that you've helped either edit, produce, or put together, and how do they compare to some of these other, I guess, thought pieces? You know, where you just have one person doing it, just from your seat as a podcast listener, but also in helping to put it together. What's your take on it? What do you like? What do you think is better? You think it matters, or it's just particular to each listener?
Well, it's so interesting because we produce now 14 shows, wow, if you can believe that. We've got 14 podcasts that we produce, and most are interview shows, but some people mix it in with some monologues, and all of the content is so varied. And that's what I love about it, is that I do a lot of the editing and we listen to a lot of these shows, and I learn so much from so many different interviews and different interviewing styles. And we've had some amazing people on. It really is whatever you like. I mean, there are a lot of interview shows out there. Like, I don't want to dig on like John Lee Dumas, because the guy has made $1 bajillion in podcasting, but his interview shows are very formulaic. In other words, it's kind of the same format, the same questions all the time. And for me personally, it's not really my thing. Lou, what you do, and really what Doug does, you know, Doug does all the interviews on our show, Nice Guys on Business. You guys both get into the personal side more. You know, right. It's not just one long ad for, hey, I'm selling you my product, right? It really is about, how did you get here? And tell me about your successes and tell me about your failures. And, you know, Lou, you do an amazing job at this, where you just really ask all the right questions to get the interesting information out. And of course, they get to talk business, and there's lots of business insight and business information. Or if you've got authors, it can be great information on writing, or who knows? I mean, you've talked to so many different people, and I love the fact that you do keep it casual, you mix it up, and you really get into their lives more. But ultimately, you know, John Lee Dumas, I don't know, he gets like hundreds of thousands of downloads every episode. So it's all about what you like, and really anything can work, because if there's a style that you like to do, you'll find somebody that wants to listen, because everybody's listening to podcasts.
So, and by the way, it is great. The conversations that I have, and I've always found this, what you brought up was really interesting. I've had guests come on the show that have been on previous podcast shows, not like yours and my show. And they have been through that more formulaic. They were handed 7 or 8 different set interview questions. There might have even been a prep call before the interview to actually, with the host, to talk about what they were going to talk about. And that's where the conversation would go. And I could tell you, as a guest on those shows, I always felt it was very robotic. It was actually one of the things that I wanted to make sure this show was different. And what I've also found is that I didn't really care I think people cared about what the real story was. Like, you know, you want to hear something personal. Everyone, they can tell that story over and over again. It becomes rote. I love that when after my interview is over, the guest is like, well, that was totally refreshing. And you've right. probably even heard some of that, like, because maybe we've kept the recording going from editing some of these shows. You're like, wow, that was a great conversation. I loved it. They actually feel good about it because we're asking the stuff that isn't the same things that are out there. So here's my question. Let's talk about this, because everyone does this differently. How you and Doug actually kind of like mash, compile, and record a whole week's worth of activity, right, in one shot. Can you walk through like what that day is like? Because people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You have a show that goes on for 5 days, and I think the listeners would love to hear when you decide to do that. What's the logistics behind that?
Yeah, I don't know what kind of idiots we are to decide that we want to publish 5 days a week, but I mean, it certainly worked out. we started one day a week, and it was just Doug and I, and we were just talking about business advice and stuff that we'd done and trying to help entrepreneurs. And then our episodes started getting so long, we decided to do 2 days a week. And then people started calling out for interviews. And we're like, okay, we could start interviewing people, right? And we got so many calls for interviews. We now do 3 interviews a week that Doug does all the interviews. And then we do 2 days of Doug and I. That's a Tuesday and Thursday. So usually, let's say it's Saturday morning, we pick a day. Saturday morning, we will get together and we'll record intros for all 3 of the interviews. In other words, Doug will have recorded the interviews, a month and a half beforehand. And we will do a quick 5 or 10 minute introduction to the interview for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we will record our Tuesday show. We'll record our Thursday show. So we do it all together. It's usually 2 to 3 hours basically on a Saturday. And then we get all the editing done, put it all together, spit it all out. And it definitely helps with the efficiency of the time in that we do it all together at one time. But I mean, it takes us a good 2 or 3 hours to get everything done. And I guess we're efficient at it, but it's still a lot of time during the course of the week to do 5 episodes a week.
I'll add this. Well, this is important. So, and this is only because I have, as the first client, I got to see the growth of NiceGuys literally happen right in front of me, where they had volunteer interns working for them who then I guess the point is, once you've recorded these 5 episodes, who then is helping to do some slicing and dicing and editing to actually produce the actual final touches of the podcast? Who's doing that at Turnkey today?
Up until about 3 months ago, that was me. Right. I was doing it all. Now, we did have an intern, Anna, who was writing the show notes. I was doing all the editing and posting and all that kind of good stuff. But since we have started Turnkey Podcast production, we have hired a full-time editor, Danny, and she does most of our editing for most of our shows now. And Anna does all the show notes. But really, if you're doing 1 or 2 days a week, you can do it all yourself if you really want to. But it's definitely, it takes some practice. It takes a little bit of work, and you just got to do what you got to do to get it out there.
So let's get behind the scenes on Strickland Bonner here. So as I understand this, up until recently, the recording of this, we're recording this in January. Who knows when this show is going live, but it's probably going to be sometime in the spring, let's just say. At that particular point, you had just stopped. For 25 years, you've been working in a band that you did weddings and bar mitzvahs or whatever, right? It was you're a guitarist for the band. You've got 3 girls that are triplets. Who are how old? How old at this particular time? How old are they now?
17.
Okay, so we're talking about they're about to go into college. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Okay, and on top of that, during the week, you actually are a data analyst, right? Work for a company. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you manage all this?
Yeah, 40 hours a week. I do the day job as a report and data analyst for Social Solutions. And then obviously I am also running Turnkey Podcast now. So I occasionally like to eat and sleep, but not very often. I was doing with the wedding band about 50 to 55 dates a year for 25 years. I mean, I played about 1,300 weddings, corporate events, bar and bat mitzvahs, and it's getting so busy with Turnkey, I had to give it up. I just don't have time on the weekends anymore. But the thing is, I just love everything I do. I really like the day job. I really like solving the puzzles. I love doing the Turnkey production. I love playing in the band. When I was doing that, I'm sure give me a month or two and I'm going to find some bar band because I'm going to be itching to play and get out again. And it's just, when you're happy and you just like what you do, it doesn't seem like it's too much and you're too busy because I just like everything I'm doing.
It's really funny, Thrive Loud listeners. This is kind of important because what's really funny about Strickland is when he talks about loving what he does, he really does, because it's not only he can geek out on you. You can, man. I've heard you geek out when it comes to the technical stuff.
I totally can.
The equipment that we've used continues to evolve. And one of my favorite emails of all time is we moved from one recording medium to another, and I've never seen so much verve and excitement. We're going to move to this platform. It does this. It does that. It can record off the phone. It could record here. And like, you felt like I was like, never seen it. But this is real. This is really who you are. And I think it's great. You've taken years of being, look, you're in music as a musician. You are around sound and audio all the time, microphones in a band and, equipment, and then transposing that skill into podcasting. And as I sit here, I joke about it. Remember when we first had to set up the mics, I actually went to Doug for this. And then about 2 minutes into this, listeners, I said, I really want to call the other guy because he seems to know a lot more than this. And that's how Strickland and I started getting to know each other. I'm like, I don't think Doug knows anything he's talking about. And Strickland was spectacular in helping not only to get the right sound, the right distance, but also what people don't understand is if something can go wrong in a recording that is done over the internet or the phone or some other mediums, it happens in podcasting, and it will happen to, as he now has 14 shows, every single one of them.
Pretty much it.
Let's talk about some of the ultimate FUBARs and challenges that you've had from the seat that you've been in. What are some of the challenges that go behind the scenes as a podcast editor?
You tell people, like you tell your guests, right? You tell your guests, don't use the computer speakers. You want to use headphones, and you don't want to use the built-in mic. You got to have a microphone, and you don't want to use speakerphone, and they do it anyway. So there are definitely challenges with that, trying to do what you can to keep the audio quality as good as possible. One of probably the most challenging edits I ever did, and Lou, this is saying a lot because we got 14 shows now. It might have to be you at Jackie the Joke Man's house.
Oh, very. share the story because it was crazy. It was nuts.
Oh, yep. So you were doing it with your portable recorder, right? Your Tascam recorder.
Correct.
And I think you were using the built-in mics, right?
So no, we had the two XLR mics that plugged into the Tascam recorder. So they were like handheld mics, not built in from the computer. So it was all just on the Tascam. Correct. All
right, so there was that. Now, they're at Jackie's house, Jackie the Joke Man, Martling, who he is, what's his book, Bow to Stern? It looks really funny. I haven't read it yet. I'm dying to read it because I loved him. He's so much fun. And so they're at his house, and it's hot, and so they got the windows open, and there's freaking construction going on outside. I mean, it's like a war zone, right? And so we've got the mics, and they're picking up different things from the different sides with the construction. And so it was, sometimes you got to do a very surgical edit. Now, fortunately, with two microphones, I did have each of you on the separate channel. So basically, whenever Jackie's not talking, I'm trying to mute him, and then I'm tweaking the EQ and doing all kinds of digital effects and stuff to try to get rid of the background noise as much as possible. And it's funny because I am a total geek for that kind of stuff. I really like doing that, but it definitely can be challenging sometimes.
I think I'll give Strickland credit because I'm obviously the example of what can go wrong with Lou and with Thrive Loud. And for the Thrive Loud listeners, what you get to hear is really high in quality, and that's because of Strickland and his team, who also, by the way, had to train interns of mine because we had so many shows going on, and how to get everything done the way it is, from montages to voiceovers and to transitions. It sounds complicated. And here's the thing. When you guys listen to the show, the meat of what you're trying to listen to is what Strickland and I are talking about now. But sound quality, it's not always ideal. And many of the people that we work with don't have all the equipment that podcast hosts have. And you would think someone who worked in radio for 20 years would have something. But going to Jackie's house was an experience. But what made it even funnier, just while we were doing it, a bird flew in to the kitchen and started chirping right before we started recording. And he goes, "Do you think that's going to be a problem?" Like, I don't know. You've been in radio for 20 years. You would know. Hey, look, what you were able to make that come together, and nobody even knows. And that's the funny part of, like, that we always joke about it. When these shows come out, the listeners love it because it's great content. It sounds good. No one knows that story. Only we do. But that's why we appreciate the work that you do so much. And for all the podcast shows that are out there, there's the people who are in the production there's a lot of work to be done, even though it is, you're trying to underplay that it's not a lot. It is a lot of work. It's to get us to even sound good is really challenging.
Well, it's funny because sometimes you do have to take kind of a surgical approach. So sometimes you get a host or a guest that does, there's like umming and like a pause is not a huge deal. You just take a pause out. But when somebody's like, I know what I want to do, it's like, it's very hard to edit that out. And I make a point not to edit out every single and because you want them to be human. But man, sometimes you just have no idea how many were in there before the edit.
So a good question that I have, and I wanted to talk about this because both you and I have been voiceovers for podcasts. You obviously are the opening voice on this great show, and I'm the voiceover for a couple of Turnkey Podcast episodes as well. We'll share that in a sec. However, you happen to have one of the better voiceover guys out there. I mean, maybe the smoothest sounding gentleman in Steve O'Brien. What people don't know is that on the Nice Guys on Business, he takes all these movie quotes from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, and he compiles them together. And I guess you're definitely behind this. And so can we talk a little bit about how you're determining what content is being done by your voiceover guy? Because it is funny stuff. Every episode is all chuckles.
So we started off with, we got this guy, Steve O'Brien. We just happened to find him through a website somewhere, and he did our intro. And then after a couple of weeks of doing it, I'm like, you know what? I'm bored with the same intro all the time. How about if we do like silly movie quotes, right? So I came up with like 10 maybe. And I reached back out to Steve O'Brien. I said, hey man, could you read these? I'm going to use these as pre-intros before our music. And he's like, yeah, okay, cool. And it went over so well, but then I've only got 10 of them again that I'm rotating once a month or something. I'm like, no, let me do more and more. And like, I would think of funny movie quotes that I could twist a certain way to make it for like the Nice Guys on Business. And it's like, oh, I got to write that down. And now I've got like, 150 or something. It's ridiculous. But I'll think about a movie and it's like, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Oh my gosh. Or Fletch, or Airplane. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to think all these funny lines from it. And I just had to hear Steve O'Brien say them. And he has the best, most dry delivery. It's just so perfect. And his reads are just amazing. And so I just kind of kept going to him and going to him and going to him. And now it's become a thing every day. It's basically rotating whatever movie quote it may be.
I love at the time that we're recording this, and I am a listener of the Nice Guys. I don't always listen every day, but I try to listen to their Tuesday, Thursday episodes as much as possible because the banter is just hysterical. And Steve O'Brien did an entire rant from Rounders, the movie. So he had every.
You recognize that?
I know them all, and I pick. I always ask a movie question at the end of every show. So I'm a big fan of it. But to hear him basically goes, no, pay the man his money.
Now, did you stay all the way? Oh. Did you stay all the way till the end to hear? I
did not stay to the end. Oh wait, which brings up to a great point. Talk about Easter eggs. Explain to the Thrive Loud community what an Easter egg is and how you guys deploy it in podcast.
Oh, God. So today's episode, I'm trying to find the episode number here. It's basically January 23rd episode. I have a number of different intros from the movie Rounders, which is just the greatest poker movie ever. And usually I just use one of them, but I liked it. And so I thought I'd tack a couple of them together. So there's one of them. Geez, I'm trying to remember now. Bottom line was I took 3 separate quotes from Rounders and blended them all together to throw them in at the beginning because I liked all of them. And there's one that at the very end, I put an Easter egg in sometimes. Let's say Doug and I are like just yapping before the episode starts, right? And sometimes we'll say funny stuff, but the tape will be rolling. And so I'll be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw that in at the end. So we'll do this episode. We'll go to the ending and it'll be the ending music and everything. And then you'll notice that the show is still another 20 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes longer, right? If you hang around, you wait maybe 5 or 10 seconds of silence, then Doug and I'll jump back in with an Easter egg. Like if you decided it was over, you missed the egg, right? And so today's Easter egg was I did 3 Rounders quotes at the beginning. And then the egg at the end is him saying, in Confessions of a Winning Poker Player, Jack says that all poker players, remarkably enough, do not remember their big wins, but remember with remarkable accuracies the big losses that they've ever had. And then the line is, he says, I absolutely believe that's true because I cannot for the life of me remember how I made my bankroll, but I can't stop thinking about how I lost it to the Nice Guys on Business.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So, by the way, for the Thrive Loud listeners, we'll put the show notes and the link. It is show 557 is the actual show that this took place, and they happen on just about every show. And what I love, whether it's Steve O'Brien or you guys will even have your own Easter eggs from the content that you might do that cuts out. And a lot of times I've seen this, you guys will take the stuff that you did before you say, okay, let's get the show going. There'll be this pre-show stuff and you'll put it at the end. Right. And it's so much fun to listen to. Just a little bit of, people getting set. Is my mic working? Is this working? A slight behind the scenes. So it's a way to really kind of feel like what it's like behind the show. And I think that authentically is you guys, because it's such a, it just becomes, I mean, we joke about this. You guys are a complete shit show most of the time. Pretty much. That's exactly who they are. There's no different. What I will tell you about Strickland and Doug, having known them now for as long as I've known them, there is no difference in the way they are in the air than the way they are in person. It's scary.
One time we got together for beers with a couple of listeners. I think it was Ryan Bowcross who was in from out of town, and we're hanging out and we're just shooting the shit and having a good time. And then he came on, I guess it was our 500th episode or something. And it was the perfect line. He said, hey, for those of you listeners out there, like you're wondering about Doug and Strick, I have sat down and had beers with them. And I can tell you that the guys that you hear on the show, they're exactly the same assholes in person that they are on the show. And that's basically it. That's what we are.
So here's the question. At the time that this episode airs, it's going to be almost 2 years since you guys have been on the air and really been running the show at the level that it's been. And a little bit, let's just say 2.5 years ago, Strickland didn't even know what a podcast was. Would you have ever thought that this is not only what you're doing, but you're also redefining the space, not just the show Nice Guys Are in Business. It's the combination of the show with what Turnkey Podcast has become. Tell me, can you believe where you're at?
Well, it's funny. We can get into some actual business advice here now. Doug mentioned to me when we started doing this, like we're a couple of months in, he's like, hey, man, you're really good at this production stuff. You know, audio. Why don't you start doing podcast production? You can make some money on it. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't love doing it that much. And I don't know that anybody would pay for it. I don't know, whatever. So then like 2 years later, so this would be like 6 or 8 months ago now, I decided to look into it again. I'm like, you know what? I really kind of am getting into it more. I enjoy it more. Maybe I will start doing something with podcast production. I start looking for some clients, and I'm not the sales guy. I'm the behind the scenes guy and the tech guy and the geek, right? So I'm not doing great finding clients, but Doug is the sales guy, and he starts talking to people who are interested in starting a podcast from scratch. Now, I'm looking for people who have a podcast already, and maybe they want me to do their editing and production, right? So Doug suggests, hey, why don't we find people? We've been doing this for 2.5 years now. We got 400 and some episodes. Let's teach other people how to make a podcast from scratch. Okay, cool. Great plan, right? So what's amazing is Doug goes out there and he is just selling like crazy, right? I hate that. I've done selling before. I can do it. I don't enjoy it, but I'm behind the scenes. I'm doing the editing. And as we're getting more and more clients, I have to come up with systems to get us more efficient because there's so much going on, right? And also we're now coming up with this system of, okay, what are the steps that need to be done to start a podcast? Okay, first of all, you got to figure out what it's going to be about. And then we need this equipment list, and we got to train you on the equipment. And then we got to do a guest management system. And we've got to, teach you how to interview people and what are the right questions to ask. And then you got to talk about social media because you got to get the word out there and you got to get people that are actually going to listen to the show. And then how to post it, all of this kind of stuff. So we're coming up with this system, and I am loving making these systems. And now again, we're at the point we have 14 clients. We have 3 more that have just come on board that are in the process right now. And so I'm constantly looking at the system, and it's like, okay, how can we make it better? What pieces have we missed, right? How can we teach guest management better? How can we make people, most of these people have day jobs or other things going on. And so we want to make it as efficient as possible for them so it doesn't take over their lives. So it's all these little things. Doug looks at me on the regular and he's like, I am so glad you do all that because I hate all that. And he says, and you're working so hard, I feel like I'm doing nothing. Where I look at Doug and I'm like, Doug, I can't sell the way you sell. And you know what? If you're not selling, I have nothing to do. All right. So
it's a perfect team.
It is. We both look at each other like, oh my God, thank you for working so hard, because we both don't want to do what the other one does.
Yeah, with all of this, I love this because we're going to have fun editing this thing. We're going to move things around that we've recorded in the beginning and move it to the end and move it to the thing. We're just going to do it just to mess with people. So here's a great question and I think you hit the nail on the head. You know exactly who you are. You know what you love. You're happy doing what you do. You really are one of the happiest guys I've ever come across. With this stuff that you do where you're living your passion every day, you are literally embodying what you say on the opening of the show. You know, people are thriving with their lives, their businesses, and their passions. Mm-hmm. What words of advice that you have? Now, I'm asking you because a lot of people that come on this show are more like the Dougs in the world. They're that face of the company and the sales thing, but you're a little in a different light of this. What words of advice from your experience with all of this, podcasting, the show, everything, do you have for the Thrive Loud community that they can appreciate?
The two biggest pieces of advice that I would have to give is, first of all, find yourself a business partner that complements you. You do not want to find somebody else that does the same thing or thinks the same way that you do, has the same philosophy. I mean, Doug and I both have the over-the-top customer service philosophy as the way to grow a business. But outside of that, we argue a lot. But it's really good, healthy arguments because we're coming from different perspectives. And there are tons of times where I'll go into a conversation thinking one thing really strongly, and Doug will point some things out to me, and I'll be like, shit, I didn't think about it like that. You're right. God damn it. And it's okay, because really it's all about getting to the right answer. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. The other thing is, it used to be, I think, in business, you'd say, hey, if this is a weakness, like this is something you don't do well, hey, you got to work on that, right? You got to practice that. I think people do not realize how amazingly draining it is to continue to work doing something you don't like, thinking, oh yeah, I've just got to get better at it. I've got to get better at it. And you just don't like it and you're not good at it, versus find somebody else that is good at it. Either find a business partner that wants to do the shit that you don't want to do, or get a virtual assistant, or go to Elance, or go somewhere, get somebody else to do it. Because when you are doing what you love and you're paying somebody else to do everything else, you just are so much happier and you're so much more efficient and you work better. I mean, it's what it's all about.
That's spectacular. So now we get to be the fun parts of the show here, Strickland. So first, give us all the plugs, every place, everywhere that they could find you or Turnkey Podcast.
So the show is the Nice Guys on Business, and so that would be niceguysonbusiness.com. Turnkey Podcast is turnkeypodcast.com, and that is podcast production start to finish. And the great thing that we didn't even get into with the Turnkey Podcast is that we have this amazing focus on how to make money from your podcast. And it's not through advertising and it's not through sponsorship. It's not the traditional way at all. It is really how to create a sales funnel. And we'll just tease it like that. And you can just contact us at turnkeypodcast.com if you want to find out more. And we're working on that with you, Lynn. I think you are really starting to twist in that direction and make more money in this way from your podcast too. But whole nother conversation for another day. But that's, those are the best places to get me. Yeah.
I love it. So this is going to be the most challenging question in the history of the signature questions for the Thrive Loud podcast. And I say this because the only other person on this planet who might like movies as much as I do might be Strickland Bonner. So Strickland, maybe you can give us the top 5 movies of your favorites of all time. Is that even possible?
Okay, so Thrive Loud listeners, as you know, this is the typical question for what's your favorite movie? And I have heard almost everybody that has given their favorite movie. And what's so funny is just this week, I finished editing the Ian Carr episode, which came out back in January.
Yeah. He listed everything, by the way. He listed like 20 movies. Ian was out of control. You're totally right. Yes, I'm just going to keep running. Keep going. Sorry for interrupting.
But that's what was so funny, because you knew ahead of time. I mean, he was a filmmaker, right? Like he went to film school. He does video production. And you knew there was no way you could narrow him down to a single movie. And when you said you wanted to get me on the show, I'm thinking to myself, shit, how on earth am I going to narrow to one movie? And then Ian I'm like, oh, okay, I've got license now. He broke the ice with that. So top 5 movies, it's so hard because it's like, okay, what kind of mood are you in, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. Like comedy. I mean, like Airplane is just so right up there. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, just absolutely amazing. But also like Fletch, I mean, and Caddyshack. I'm just a huge Chevy Chase fan. And excuse me, can I borrow your towel? My car just
ran into an overflow, right?
Oh my God. And like all the movie quotes that I could come up with. Oh my God. It's just,
maybe this is the best way to ask this question. I'm going to re-ask the question. What's your favorite Steve O'Brien entrance? Opening to the Nice Guys on Business podcast. His favorite movie interpretation of reading the quotes that you love the most. I think that's the best way to ask this question.
You know what is hilarious is that I've been doing this for, again, almost 3 years now with the podcast. And so when I hear these Steve O'Brien opens, I still laugh sometimes when I put them on off because his reads are so good. I think my two favorite ones, there's one from Airplane where I had him do separate ones of like, yeah, pick the wrong week to stop sniffing glue, pick the wrong week to stop drinking, pick the wrong week to quit amphetamines. And he improv stuff sometimes, right? And so after those, he improved, pick the wrong week to stop being assholes.
That's great.
I love that. And then Ferris Bueller, he did the same thing. There was one where he said, the geeks, the sluts, the bloods, the wastoids, the motorheads, they all think they're righteous dudes. Like they all think Ferris is a righteous dude, right? And I put the quote in of like the geeks, the motorheads, whatever. They all love him. And he improved, they think they're righteous dudes. Like that. I mean, that you have to have that second half of the line. It totally makes the line. And I'm like, God, I can't believe I forgot that. And he just dropped it right in because he knew it had to be there.
It's so good. I have a feeling I might have to do some copyright infringement and possibly play those particular quotes at the top of today's show. I think we could work that in. Maybe I could get a pass from Steve O'Brien of something of that nature as today on Thrive Loud and then hit it. That could work.
Oh yeah, if you want some of the Steve O'Brien reads, believe me, I'll be happy to pass them along to you. That would be funny.
It's great stuff. Strickland Bonner, truly great to have you on Thrive Loud. Finally, is what people have been saying. When's he coming on the show? He's on. Here he is. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so funny too. I'm the guy that does your voiceover in the intro. That's hilarious.
And you forget it, right? And by the way, I'm doing voiceover intros to shows I don't even know what they are. But no.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, it was funny because when we did yours, it was like, hey, we can go, pay Steve O'Brien. I'm like, here, I'll do just a rough one, right? I'll do a mix and you're like, yeah, that's cool, man. That sounds good. Let's do it. Like, okay, cool.
When Doug came on the show on Thrive Loud, he made fun of the fact he's like, Lou's like, hey, this is the inexpensive way to do it.
Right, exactly.
But the reality was, and this is the truth, is that you and I have these complementary voices. Yours is a little more scratchy on the way that you speak and are able to hit that, where mine's more similar to Doug's. That's why you guys sound so well when you're together. It's a clear dichotomy to who's speaking in each of your different voices, which is, look, there's all different types of voiceovers. It just happened to be the right one, because otherwise it would sound too much like me. If O'Brien opened this show, it would be the same thing. You have that distinct sound that people like, and they say it works great with the music as well.
Well, it's funny you say that because we have a show that's called Capital Call, and it's like Wharton Business School alumni, and excuse me, so it's really serious, and so I again did a rough voiceover, but I did it in the sort of Masterpiece Theater. So I said, welcome to the Capital Call. This is your whatever, right? And so I did it as serious as I could, right? And they said, yeah, the words are good, but that guy, he's too rock and roll. I'm like, oh my God, even when I'm doing Alistair Cook, it's still just too rock and roll. I don't know. It's just whatever. You can't, that's what it is. But Lou, you got at least one, maybe two different shows that we produced. You do the intro. I love yours.
We got Tina Martini's show, where I'm the voice of Paradigm Shift, and on Men on Purpose with Emerald Greenforest. So those are two that I've done. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. And anyway, man, dude, thank you so much for coming to the show. This has been awesome.
Lou, man, thanks for having me.
You got it. And to all the Thrive Loud listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, you want to do it, man? Close it out.
Oh my gosh. I'm honored. Be brief, be bright, be gone. You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.
Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. Wait a second. I've been thriving loud my entire life. When the heck am I going to be a guest on one of these shows? Lou Diamond? Sounds like a motivational country singer if you ask me.